Did you need something? Sure, I could go for another round, and don't bother with all the shit I asked you to get before.
Dude, why am I even playing this game? Okay, so if you've never heard of House Party before, the clip at the beginning of this video should give you a pretty clear indication as to what kind of video game this is. Now, I never knew that this game existed until maybe about a year ago, and the way I learned about it was in a completely unrelated matter. For the most part, I play a lot of roguelike games on Steam, but when Cyberpunk 2077 came out last year, I just had to play it because of all the hype. There's a whole lot I can say about that game, but we're not here to talk about Cyberpunk 2077. I'm here to talk specifically about that damn dick slider on the character customization screen. Of course, there's nothing wrong with a dick slider, nor is there anything wrong about nudity in video games. I've got no problem with that. The problem is, after I finished playing the game, Steam suddenly thought that I was in love with sexual content. It even got to the point that one of my main recommended tags in the Steam store became sexual content. And come on, Valve, seriously? Do I really love sexual content just because of a dick slider? A fucking dick slider, dude? But hey, maybe Valve was on the right track. That dick slider was more of a blessing than I had thought at the time, because without it, I would have never discovered House Party in my Steam store discovery queue. And when I did, I had no idea what to expect. At first, I was like, wow, this game looks sick. It's an open-ended social simulator? So kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure game, right? Then I read the part where it says there's a button to take your pants off. I probably should have been clued in immediately by the raunchy-looking screenshots of the game, but that's when I finally realized what this game was. It's a porn game.
But she told me to flash the cutest guy here, and, well, that's you.
Okay, it's more than that. It's actually super reductionist to call this game a porn game, and I'm actually here to defend this game and tell you why it's an interesting and entertaining piece of media beyond just its adult content. So, let's back up a bit so I can tell you what roped me into this game. As I had mentioned before, this game in its essence is kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure game. Ultimately, it's an interactive narrative where you get to make choices and your choices affect what happens to these characters. Honestly, most video games are really just interactive narratives at their core. The premise of the game is simple. Your lifelong friend Derek has invited you to a house party hosted by a college-aged girl named Madison. And when you get there, you are completely free to do whatever it is you want. There can be up to 15 other guests at this party. Each one of them has a wide array of stories to explore, and when I say wide, I mean wide. Every single story branches out from one another, and new opportunities arise as a result of your actions. And some opportunities can even close too. There are thousands of ways for this story to play out. For example, one of the characters named Amy has a storyline in which you can help her do a scavenger hunt for items that'll help her get into a sorority. Some of the items can be acquired through different methods, like knocking out one of the dudes at the party and sifting through his pockets. But you don't have to knock him out. You can just tell the guy you're attracted to him, and after one thing leads to another, you can get the aforementioned item from him without any violence. Not only can you do that, but you can also just tell Amy to forego doing the scavenger hunt at all. And doing this can actually get you into her good graces. And if you do that, a whole new line of opportunities arise as well. I won't tell you what those opportunities are, but you can probably hazard a guess as to what to expect. Let's just say that your opportunity is definitely going to arise. The most important thing to note here is that everything you do is your choice, and you can unfold the stories whichever way you wish. You can even just pop into the party and just start beating everyone up just for the hell of it. The game will let you do that. I mean, the guests won't be very happy with you, but nothing is stopping you from doing that. House Party is a sandbox adventure game with both good and bad consequences, and its allowance for freedom and player choice is what makes it incredible. But it isn't without its flaws either. Let's take a deeper dive into House Party, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. first thing you'll notice about House Party is just how accurate and mesmerizing its atmosphere is. Once the game starts, you instantly feel like you've been transported to an actual party. A fucked up, surreal version of a party, yes, but a party nevertheless. The game's ability to make you feel that way is powerful. I commend any piece of media that manages to be engrossing enough to make you buy into its setting and its characters. And speaking of characters, every single one of them is a great addition to this game. Every single character has their own distinct personality and motivations, and no two characters are alike. Except for maybe all the explicit stuff that goes down. And even then, they still have different wants and expressions. Not only that, but the voice acting for the characters is great, albeit somewhat over the top on purpose. And the voice talent is good enough to not take you out of the game and make you feel like the voices were an afterthought.
This baby bra had great potential, but his teachers would always make him feel bad because words with more than 4 letters in them played tricks on his brain and didn't make no sense. He also liked to catch stuff on fire and steal porno mags from the gas station. For these reasons, that boy was labeled a problem child.
And like I said earlier, each character has a wide variety of stories to explore, and you can explore them in whatever manner you see fit. This is the strongest part of the game. Your choices affect everything, and knowing that, you won't be able to complete every opportunity in just one playthrough. This makes it feel like your choices actually matter, and you're not just clicking options and hoping that something good happens. Paying attention to detail is crucial. Understanding the different characters and their personalities is key to completing different tasks for them. It isn't as simple as just closing your eyes and hoping you'll get to have fun with those characters just because you dance with them. You need to listen to conversations, you need to ask questions, you need to explore the house, you need to do a lot of things. All of these hoops you have to jump through actually doesn't feel like a chore. Instead, it feels like a great way to learn more about these partygoers and what makes them tick and what makes them happy. The game rewards you for paying attention to the story, and that's what makes this game more than just a simple porn game. Of course, there's more depth to the game than just its puzzle-like elements. The writing for this game is actually really good, and none of the lines written for the characters sound especially out of place. Not even the parts where the characters are breaking the fourth wall on purpose. The developers did a really good job in making sure that each character has their own distinct voice, which is challenging when you're juggling 15 different personalities.
To the proverbial sun. One day you're cracking passwords for fun, next thing you know you're in a prison in the Ukraine and they're telling you to squat and cough. Really ruined sophomore year. Give me a sec.
Beyond just the actual dialogue, the scenarios that the developers came up with are super creative and interesting as well. Of course, there are your typical party shenanigans like pulling a prank on someone or spilling beer onto people. But then you've got really creative scenarios like dealing with a robot AI and trying to shut down a morally dubious website hosted on its servers. There are a boatload of interesting stories to unpack in this game, and I can't talk about them all. I don't even have the time to talk about all of the characters. Except maybe Frank. He's the best character. You know he is.
My balls are tingling, and they only do that when someone around me has been drinking. I think it's on account of them being so enormous.
Anyway, let's talk a little bit more about the writing and why it makes this game so good. The humor is oftentimes clever and actually really funny at times. And even though some of the jokes get kind of lowbrow, the game's humor centers more on the idea of being over-the-top excessive and indulgent.
For tits!
Oh, God. Please don't tell me you're Madison's. You wanna dance with me?
Being over-the-top excessive is this game's strong suit. The developers know exactly what kind of game this is, and they know exactly how people perceive it. And this allows them to make the experience even better by utilizing the game's premise and reputation as a means to be self-aware and lighthearted about it. You'll laugh when you play this game. There's seriously some ridiculous stuff in it. As long as you don't take it too seriously, you'll find yourself amused by just about every scenario this game puts you in. And there are a ton of scenarios you'll be put into. I know I keep mentioning just how much stuff you can do in this game, but it's seriously one of its strong suits. There's so much content to do for how cheap this game is, and not only that, there are a ton of custom stories from other users you can download. You can even create your own scenarios too if that's what you like doing. And did I mention the soundtrack? More specifically, that same looping song that'll get stuck in your head until you unlock the MP3 player? Yeah, it's actually really damn good. I'm not being sarcastic. You'd be surprised at how much that grating song grows on you as you play the game for hours on end.
I mean, hell yeah, I would. We gotta get some different beats up in here for this to be an actual party. What's the last party you've been to where they just played the same song on repeat?
The developers have definitely perfected everything in the sound department. And yes, I unfortunately mean the sound effects too, if that's your cup of tea. I'm not going to play any of those sound effects though, because this video is already pushing the limits on what's considered explicit on this website. You're just going to have to play the game yourself if that's what you're looking for. But for all the good things this game has, there are still some design flaws and early access errors that continue to plague this game. I won't say that they ruin the game by any means, but let's take a look at them anyway. One of the more obvious flaws that this game has is its graphics. I'm not saying that the game needs to look as beautiful as The Witcher 3 or anything, but you can tell it's a little rough and dated and it could at times use a little bit of a lift. The animations are sometimes kind of jank and the lip syncing of the dialogue is occasionally off. And although I want to say that the jankiness contributes to the silly and distinct atmosphere of the game, because it does, I also have to say that the game cannot be totally excused for how the character models can interact in very off-putting ways. But it's nothing that the developers can't fix over time. What might be a little bit more tricky, however, is dealing with the issue of ambient dialogue. Or should I say, the severe lack of it. Yes, one of the characters breaks the fourth wall occasionally to call out this problem by implying that she doesn't really have any. But breaking the fourth wall and being self-aware about the issue doesn't necessarily excuse the game for this. If you aren't aware, then ambient dialogue is basically the random dialogue spoken by NPCs in the background to give them a little bit of life.
I definitely didn't fart. So if you smell anything, know it's definitely not me.
But this is the problem. This isn't the developer's fault at all. It's just the nature of how games work. You can't give these characters an infinite amount of ambient dialogue and tasks and interactions with each other, because that's just impossible. Yet, even still, the fact that the ambient dialogue is limited works against the game in a really heavy fashion. If you play a game like Skyrim and you hear the same dialogue over and over again, it's just whatever because the game is so huge and expansive that it's a lot easier to ignore. But in House Party, you're stuck in a small confined space, and you start to get taken out of the story when you're wandering around and talking to the same people over and over again trying to figure out what to do next. And as they too wander around, they're telling each other the same stories over and over again throughout the night, and the setting starts to feel less like a party and more like a personal hell. When you first start the game, it feels extremely fresh and new and lively and completely enthralling to interact with all the characters and see them interact with each other in various ways. That's why I said in the previous section that the game really feels like an actual party. But when these characters begin to just keep repeating everything they do and say, they start to feel less like characters and more like aimless robots whose sole purpose is for you to, well, you know. And that's a problem. Maybe it's fine if you want this to be a simple porn game, but I want this game to be more than that. Because it is more than that. And that's the dilemma. I don't really have a solution for this because I have absolutely zero experience in game design. And the thing is, this whole issue isn't even really too much of a problem. Like in most games, you just learn to deal with and tune out all the extraneous repetitive dialogue. That's just what you have to do. Although, it would be nice if the characters did have a little bit more ambient dialogue. And beyond that, perhaps random events could happen throughout the night that aren't scripted by where you currently are in the story. Like, perhaps some of the characters can randomly get into an argument and have a dance battle with each other to settle their differences. Or maybe some of the characters can get into a heated debate in the living room and you have the opportunity to goad on the conflict or try to de-escalate it. It would put a lot more life into the game to have these random events happening, especially if you're playing multiple playthroughs. It keeps things fresh and unpredictable. And if I'm being a bit nitpicky, I find it very odd that the party goers are ultimately very forgiving when you act extremely repulsive. Like, nobody calls the cops when you just whip your thang out for no reason. But being nitpicky is good. From my point of view, that just means I don't find this game to have too many fatal flaws. But there is something that I have to address, because with the nature of this game's sexual content, I can't just ignore it. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then, well, the easiest way for me to put it is this. How moral is a game like this? And how problematic is it exactly in its portrayal of men, women, and sexuality? Let's discuss that next. In the past, House Party has been removed and banned off of multiple social platforms and storefronts, such as on Twitch and on Steam. Today, House Party is actually available on Steam for purchase again due to some new censors and other slight modifications. But the fact of the matter is, it was previously banned for its explicit content. There are a number of things I want to comment on here. First, Eek Games, the developers of House Party, addressed this censorship a few years ago by noting that it's much more socially acceptable to engage in the fantasy of killing another person in every perversion imaginable than it is to fantasize about having sex with another person. And I'm inclined to agree with them. We're a lot more culturally accepting of showing harsh depictions of violence in all forms of media than we are of seeing sex and nudity. And if I'm fine with seeing blood, gore, executions, and so many things that are far more deplorable than consenting sex, then I, along with many other people, should be fine with nudity in video games, such as in House Party. But obviously, the issue is a bit more complex than just censorship of sex and nudity. House Party has also been accused of being misogynistic, and also being guilty of objectifying women in a juvenile way. And I actually want to push back on that idea. I will agree that to an extent, the game does objectify both men and women to a degree, especially due to being awarded with sex at the end of storylines as a goal. But it isn't as simple as calling that a problematic aspect of the game. To call this game pure objectification would be wrong. In many ways, it's a game that explores sexual freedom and sexual independence as well. And the characters are in no way just mere sex objects. They have motivations that go beyond that, and to ignore those motivations would be unfair to the game as a whole. Sure, maybe the game was created to satisfy typical male fantasies to a degree, and the game's very existence can be criticized for this. But I don't know if I can say that this is necessarily some sort of evil that needs to be censored and wiped away off the face of the earth. Not only is there a disclaimer at the beginning of the game that warns you of its fictitiousness and ridiculousness, but the characters also serve as reminders that all of this is in essence an over-the-top comedy more than it is a sexual adventure. Yes, perhaps this game portrays an unrealistic take on both men and women's wants and needs, but it portrays an unrealistic take on just about everything. And the characters are there to often break the fourth wall and tell you that. Exploring sexuality does not have to be something that's always seen in a negative light. Would I call this game the greatest piece of media to ever make social commentary on the nature of sexuality and desire? No, I would not. But that doesn't mean that it isn't a valid game and experience that explores those themes in a relatively humorous way. But I will note that it's fair to be critical of this game's portrayals of sex, because at the end of the day, it's a subject that is and will continue to be debated upon for a very long time. And as a heterosexual cis male, I cannot speak to the experience and perceptions of others, and anyone is free to make valid complaints and criticisms based upon their own ideologies so long as they're portraying this game accurately. I will add this though, you don't have to do anything explicit in this game at all. It's ultimately your choice. While the options to do explicit things are there, it is your responsibility as a player to make that decision. And that's why I don't think the game is too problematic at all. But I'll leave you with this idea to think about to end this section once and for all. If I were making a video depicting the most violent video game possible, where you're allowed to rip the spines out of people's backs, and yes, that is a thing, then would people in YouTube care as much to censor and demonetize the content? I'll let you figure that one out. So I hesitated making this video for a while because it just felt too taboo and wrong and weird to make content based off of such an explicit video game. But once I actually played through it, it made me realize how little I thought about not only the lack of cultural acceptance of adult video games, but also how far behind we are in being inclusive and understanding of such content in our media. So that's why I chose to make this video on House Party. It really is an amazing game. If you can get over the fact that this game is super graphic at times in terms of presenting explicit acts and content, then it's an incredible interactive tale of party hijinks. And if you're just into the sex stuff, then sure, you'll probably love this game just based off of that alone. Either way, I'd like to thank you all for watching and making it all the way to the end of this video. If you like this video and would like to see similar content in the future, don't forget to like the video and subscribe and check out my other videos. I focus on all things writing related. Lastly, here's a special thanks to my single patron, Edith Lopez Torres, whose support helped make this video possible. If you'd like to check out my Patreon, I'll leave a link in the description. I'd appreciate the support. Again, thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.